What's good, fam? Teacher Eddie back with another reaction. So yesterday, I did a video about the Kennedy assassination. Then I did a video about Lincoln and how his body was stolen and then lost for 35 years. So I figured, hey, why not continue the theme and talk about what Salmonella calls the presidential assassination nobody talks about, which is the assassination of President James A. Garfield. This is, to me, actually the most fascinating of all four presidential assassinations, which the first, of course, was Abraham Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley, and Kennedy. So this one is like, if somebody wrote this script, people will be like, come on, man, stop being ridiculous. There's no way this could happen. This is not plausible. There are so many twists and turns in this one, from Garfield's rise to power, to Guiteau, who is one of the most probably misunderstood characters. There are so many falsehoods out there about him. Yeah, he was batshit crazy, but he was batshit crazy in a way that is far more interesting than Oswald or Booth. And also Garfield's rise to power. Again, he is not somebody who wanted to be president. He actually fought against being president. Originally, Ulyssess Grant was trying for a third term, but the Republicans nominated Garfield, even though he didn't even try. Like, literally, he did nothing. And when he got the nomination, he was like, fuck, why? But he also did a lot in the very short period of time he was in office. But then it gets even more interesting after he gets shot. And I actually did a presidential iceberg video where I discuss in detail of how basically doctors and Alexander Graham Bell killed the president, not Charles Guiteau. So Salmonella, love Salmonella. So let's get into it. And of course, I'll drop my historical knowledge as history teacher extraordinaire as we go.
Hey kids, John Wilkes Booth, Lee Harvey Oswald, Hitler, all people who gained massive notoriety by killing one of history's famous leaders. But there are two
that's true. Hitler did kill himself.
Americans who committed an equally heinous crime as these three, yet their stories are seldom remembered, mostly because nobody really cares about the presidents they killed. Originally I was going to talk about both of them, but the video ended up being way too long, so today we'll just stick to, this one I guess. Charles J. Guiteau was a pretty silly guy, and to understand how a guy could be so silly, you gotta start with his youth. Guiteau was born in Freeport, Illinois in 1841. His mom had postpartum psychosis and died when he was 7, alongside 3 of his 5 siblings. His dad, meanwhile, was mega religious and made a big point out of instilling those values in his son, often physically. This influence molded Charles into a boy who sought nothing short of total approval from others and who would react very harshly to any criticism levied upon him. As a teen, he moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan for high school. He tried to get into the University of Michigan, but he goofed on the entrance exam. So he did what anyone in his situation would do and said, well, so much for real life. I'm gonna join a commune. Specifically, he became part of the Oneida community in New York. In some aspects, this place was a pretty run-of-the-mill religious fellowship. From each according to their ability, to each according to their need, yada yada. But there are a couple of things that made it special. First off, they followed a doctrine known as Christian perfectionism, whereby everyone would strive to live their lives completely free of sin and reach a divine level of perfection while still on earth. Now this isn't really unique to Oneida, but whereas most people would achieve this through staunch discipline and careful self-reflection, these guys would just get together and take turns roasting the shit out of each and every member over any minute flaw they could possibly have. Real great for the psyche. They also practiced what was basically an early form of eugenics, where aspiring parents would have to submit an application and be judged by the committee on their moral and spiritual fortitude. If they were allowed to mate, children would be separated from the mom about a year after birth and raised communally in the children's wing. After all, wouldn't want any of those hopelessly flawed toddlers to think they're deserving of any affection whatsoever. Oneida also believed in what they called free love, which which meant
Yeah.
that anyone could bang anyone at any time, as long as they kept it hetero, and exclusive relationships of any kind were actually frowned upon, which seems like kind of a weird habit for people trying to 100% FC this whole Christianity thing, but whatever. But wait, you're saying, how can you have selective breeding at the same time as extremely unselective breeding?
Oh, you mean religious fanatics don't make sense? Religion in itself mostly doesn't make sense. So Charles Guiteau, so this is a very, very, very important point in his life, which later on leads to the reason why he actually kills Garfield. Like, he had a very specific reason. And it really wasn't as much about politics as it was about himself, right? Because John Wilkes Booth, his whole thing was, of course, he still thought the South could win. Lee Harvey Oswald was a far, 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 like, he went to the Soviet Union and was like, yo, man, you ain't communist enough. I'm going back to America. You know, so they were fueled by political ideology, whereas Guiteau was fueled by himself. Like, he felt his entire life that not only did he deserve, you know, high offices and everything else, like, even after he assassinates Garfield, he thinks he's going to get off, and we'll get into it. It's an amazing defense, because eventually Guiteau does become a lawyer. A terrible lawyer, but he does become a lawyer. And he thought he was going to go free, and he was actually planning to run for president in 1884, because he thought he could win, right? So this has a huge influence, because this is where he begins to believe that God is speaking to him, that his mission in life is a divine mission, right? Kind of like the Blues Brothers, right? Every time be like, yo, Guiteau, man, what's up with you? He's like, I'm on a mission from God, son. But also another huge misconception I get from people is a lot of people think that Guiteau was an immigrant. Well, he was not. He was born in Illinois. He was born in the United States. But whether it be for his name, or if you see a picture of him, the way he looks, a lot of people think he was some, like, crazy anarchist foreigner, which couldn't be further from the truth.
Aha. See, that's where male continence comes in. Under this rule, a pair could go at it for as long as they wanted, with the caveat that the dude's not allowed to nut, pull out or otherwise. That way, it's not a sin. After all, as the Bible says, if the dick don't spit, you must acquit. Paradoxically, no such rule existed for the women. In fact, not only did the commune believe in female orgasms, they actually prioritized them, which is like unheard of in the 19th century.
True.
They'd even have the middle-aged women of the society train the teen boys in the art of holding in the old pelvic sneeze. That way, there wouldn't be any...
The pelvic sneeze. Jesus Christ, brilliant. Salmonella, I love you. So much better than dick snot.
chance of conception in case the guy goofs up his first few tries. So anyway, young Guiteau joins this whole thing, and endured countless blows to his massive yet fragile ego, thinking he's at least gonna get a piece of this communal action. Except, the criticism towards him wasn't just a formality like it was for others. Everyone there genuinely fucking hated him, on account of the fact that he was a raving neurotic narcissist. He never caught a single piece of this allegedly free love, and after a while, they all started calling him Charles Get Out in the hopes that he'd leave. This is real. And after 5 long years of this abuse, Guiteau finally got the hint and moved to New Jersey. He tried starting a newspaper themed around the Oneida religion called the Daily Theocrat, except nobody cared, so that failed. He went back to Oneida and tried to sue the place in order to get back pay for all his voluntary unpaid labor while living.
Yeah, this was the type of lawyer he was. He tried to get paid for voluntary labor, which he agreed to. You can't go back and be like, you know what, I wasn't a volunteer that whole time.
There. But apparently I'm mad butthurt isn't a valid reason for prosecution, so that went nowhere. Finally he said, well, when your devotion to God has failed you, there's only one path in life left. Time to become a lawyer. He managed to pass an examination to gain admission to the Illinois bar, and subsequently joined a law firm in Chicago at the age of 27, where he met his soon-to-be wife, one Annie Bunn. Of course, Guiteau never really got to be a lawyer. He only argued in one actual court case. Most of his time was...
Yeah, that's true. He only argued one court case. of course, until his own. And again, brilliant defense, which we'll get into. But I think it's the other way around. I could be wrong. But Guiteau first got a job at a law firm and then just managed to squeeze in by taking an exam to be admitted to the bar. And then he continued to work for that same law firm. But basically what he did was mostly bill collecting.
Spent doing bill collection for random clients. This job gave him insight into how debtors think and operate, which allowed him to turn into quite the con man, dodging bills whenever and wherever he saw the opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
Even on the job, he'd frequently charge exorbitant contingency fees after the fact, upwards of 75%. And sometimes he'd just keep it all and completely ghost his clients. After all, what are they gonna do? Send another bill collector? Well, it turns out they did, so Guiteau and his wife fled to New York. Here he ditched law and started getting into politics. Specifically, he wrote and delivered a speech in favor of Horace Greeley, the 1872 Democratic presidential candidate. And he somehow got it in his head that if Greeley won, his campaign would be so greatly indebted to him that they'd fulfill his desires to be the Minister of Chile, as though a total rando like him could just, name a job and it would be his. In reality, the speech was an incoherent mess heard by next to no one, and Greeley lost by a landslide. As the years passed, Annie got
Yeah, also the speech that he did write was pretty much completely plagiarized. He didn't actually write it. He just took a whole bunch of different passages from different scholars and writers and historians and kind of like basically copy and pasted it together and then delivered it. He thought it was brilliant, of course. Also during this time, he even wrote a book. A theological book, which of course was also plagiarized. And remember this fact because later on, he's also going to write a speech for Garfield, which originally was not written for Garfield. It was originally written for, I believe it was Grant. Because here he argues against Grant and supports the other guy, even though Grant was probably the most popular man in America at the time, after Lincoln. But Lincoln, of course, has been dead for several years. So it was like a no-brainer that Grant was going to win, and he won in a landslide. And then later on, Guiteau tries to back Grant when Grant is going for the third term. But then when Garfield is nominated, he basically just crosses out Grant's name in his speech and replaces it with Garfield. That's all he does.
real sick of living life on the run with a broke-ass bitch. And Charles was none too keen on her weighing him down either. But back in the day, you couldn't just divorce someone willy-nilly. You needed a valid reason for it.
Yeah.
So Charles concocted the brilliant scheme of banging a prostitute and then having her testify in court. The plan worked, with the pair successfully divorced.
This is 100% true. And there's been a lot of debate as to Guiteau's mental state, right? So when they did examine his brain after his execution, they noticed that, I forget which part, but a certain part of your brain, his brain was actually very enlarged. And they came to the conclusion that he most likely had neurosyphilis, which he caught from banging a prostitute. Was it this prostitute? Maybe. If yes, that's some good-ass revenge, right? But then a lot of doctors disagreed with that notion and said that basically he was a psychopath with narcissistic tendencies. So there's a lot of disagreement as to what his mental state really was. Some people say he was completely sane when he killed Garfield, but he had delusions of grandeur and schizophrenia. So it's all over the place. But if he did, in fact, have neurosyphilis, it could possibly have come from this incident. But you got to admit, shitty lawyer, but he comes up with some really great defenses. He's like, yeah, we need to get divorced because I just banged this prostitute. First witness, please. Prostitute.
Divorcing in 1874, and the only downside was syphilis. Whoops. Guiteau started dabbling in theology again around this time. He published a book called The Truth, which was
Yes.
almost entirely plagiarized directly from John Noyes, the founder of the Oneida community. But despite being a man of God, Guiteau was still very much a two-time varmint, and moved frequently in the dead of night to keep collectors off his tail. His brother caught wind of this and wrote him a letter basically saying, hey, maybe you should pay your bills now and then so you can be, a functioning member of society. To which Charles replied, and I quote, "Find $7 enclosed, stick it up your bunghole and wipe your nose on it, and that will remind you of the estimation in which you are held by Charles J. Guiteau." God damn. And to his own brother, the madman. Soon after he got arrested, bailed out by his sister, lived with her for a few months, attacked her with an axe, went to DC, rambled about religion to anyone who would listen, moved to Boston, got in a boat accident where everyone in his boat was fine, but everyone in the other one fucking died, took this as a sign from God, moved back to New York, and got back into politics in 1880.
Yeah. So the boat incident, definitely, Guiteau himself admitted that he felt he survived that boat crash, and that was like the final sign to him that God was protecting him, and that what he was on and what he was doing was divinely inspired, right? He genuinely believed this.
This time as a Republican. During this campaign, there were two main factions of Republicans, known as the Stalwarts and the Half-Breeds, which sounds like some Tolkien shit, wish we had names like that today. Now, Guiteau considered himself a stalwart, and in a similar vein to his 1872 venture, he wrote a speech to promote stalwart candidate Ulyssess S. Grant, who was shooting for his third term. But before he got a chance to deliver the speech, one James A. Garfield took the candidacy completely out of nowhere, beating out both factions single-handedly. He was like, rats, how am I gonna get power handed to me now? So he literally just scribbled out all the references to Grant and replaced them with Garfield and was like, yep, that'll do it. He read this speech all of twice, along with handing out copies to the Republican National Committee. In reality,
100%.
this really didn't accomplish much, but when Garfield managed to win the election, Guiteau was like, yes, that was entirely me. Garfield is in my supreme debt. As God is my witness, he shall make me a consulate in Vienna or Paris or someplace cool like that. He went to DC to await his inevitable appointment.
This is 100%. Like I said, man, this story is just so insane. But yes, he genuinely believed that he was the influence that got Garfield elected. 100% he believed this. That his speech, which, like Sam said, he delivered all of 2 times, was like the crushing blow that got Garfield elected.
But obviously nothing happened, so he started writing letters. A lot of letters. When that didn't work, he started actually stalking both Garfield and the Secretary of State, James Blaine, intercepting them in hotel lobbies, just being like, oh hey, yeah, it's me,
100%.
the sole person responsible for your success. Say, how about a consulship? Alright, you'll get back to me, I get it. Whoa, haha, what a coincidence. Me again. How's that consulship coming? At first they simply ignored him, but eventually Blaine snapped, screaming, never speak to me again on the Paris consulship as long as you live.
Word for word, that is exactly what Blaine said. This is so, like, I'm not questioning, because Sam is always really good with his research. But literally, this is exactly what happened. Dude was stalking them and trying to get a consulship. This is 100% true. But yeah, I mean, this is a person who generally thought that he was the man, and again, on a divine, mission from God, to fix this country.
I sense a disturbance in the force. Maybe daylight savings just made Monday an hour longer. Wow, Garfield, that was quite the wisecrack. It's amazing how you managed to keep things fresh year after year. Burn in hell, beige dog. At this point, Guiteau completely renounced any faith in the current administration, and after a lifetime of clout chasing met only with disappointment, he decided his only option was straight up going postal. He convinced himself that it was now God's will to remove Garfield from this mortal plane in order to put his stalwart vice president Chester Alan Arthur into power. When he went to buy a revolver, he was given the choice between a wood grip and an ivory grip. He went with the ivory one for no other reason than he thought it would look cooler in a museum, and on July 2nd.
Yes, 100% true. Actually, he had borrowed something like $14 or $15 from a relative in order to go and buy the gun. And again, just like Sam said, there were two choices. One with wooden grips, one with ivory grips. The ivory grip gun was $1 more, and he didn't have the extra dollar. But the shopkeeper lowered the price for him. And that is exactly the reason Guiteau, I mean, this is the way he was thinking, that he was going to be a hero, much like Booth. Booth thought he was going to be a hero, and when even his own side called him a criminal, like, he was taken aback. He was like, how dare you? Criminal, I'm a fucking hero, you know? So yeah. He literally got the one with the ivory grip just because he thought it was going to look cool in a museum. And the funny part was there were pictures taken of the gun in the Smithsonian, but the gun was lost. Nobody knows where it is. It's gone. So even though it was going to be displayed in a museum like Guiteau wanted, at the end of the day, it just got lost and trashed, and people are like, man, who cares?
In 1881, he ambushed Garfield at the Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station, shooting him twice in the back and mortally wounding him, all because he wouldn't give him a job. Garfield managed to hang on for 11 weeks before finally dying, which sounds like hell. Today's modern physicians actually believe that Garfield could have easily survived the incident if it weren't for doctors digging through him with unsanitized tools. Hey, modern medicine, thanks for not being
Yes, this is where it gets even crazier. So actually Guiteau, because again, like Sam said, he was basically stalking Garfield. So he would go from flop house to flop house, ducking out on bills, and he would find discarded, newspapers, because of course he couldn't buy one. And he was literally just keeping tabs on, the president's schedule, where he was appearing, etc., etc. So the president was planning a vacation at the time. His wife went ahead without him, and he was going to join her. So he had actually escorted her to the train station, and Guiteau was there. But Guiteau, even though, whatever, the syphilis, psychopath, whatever it is, decided against shooting Garfield at that point because he didn't want to upset his wife. He actually cared about her feelings, even though it's like, yeah, you don't want to upset her, but you're going to kill her husband anyway. I mean, she's going to get upset either way, but he was like, I didn't want to kill him in front of her. Now, the other interesting point here is that Guiteau decided to use a gun because in his mind, he was like, Garfield's too tough for a knife, right? It's all that lasagna he'd be packing away. He's like, if I try to kill Garfield with a knife, he's going to literally beat the shit out of me. He's going to knock my block off with one punch. Because Garfield was not to be trifled with, right? We're talking about a Union general here. So that's the reason he chose to use a gun, because originally he wanted to use a knife, but he was like, nah, man, homeboy's going to fuck me up if I try this with a knife.
Worse than literally no medicine. It means a lot. But that didn't stop Guiteau from being formally charged with murder. And that's exactly what he wanted. Matter of fact, Guiteau was over the moon, taking his new nationwide infamy as the fame.
Oh yeah, he was so happy about this, but Sam didn't cover it, the craziness of Garfield's death. So by modern standards, and not even modern standards, like a decade or two later, modern standards, right, of sterilization and everything else. Doctors at the time didn't believe in crazy things like germs. What are these germs you speak of? You can't even see them, right? So most, not all, but the vast majority of medical professionals believe even if they just left Garfield alone and let his body heal, he would have been perfectly fine, right? Or at the very least, if they used sterile techniques, he would have lived. His wounds were not mortal wounds. The only shot that was an issue was the one that hit, it just barely missed his spinal column, but it hit a vertebrae. But that was not a mortal wound. His doctors start prodding his body, not only with unsanitary, unwashed instruments, but also no gloves, dirty ass hands, and they're just probing all over this guy. But then comes in Alexander Graham Bell. And Alexander Graham Bell, while inventing the telephone, all right, Meucci, while Graham was inventing the telephone, he had also invented a metal detector. And who better to test this new metal detector on than the President of the United States? I mean, who else would be a great guinea pig, right? So he shows up, Graham Bell shows up with the metal detector, and he's like, don't worry, I'm going to find the bullet. Easy peasy, right? But as he's going over Garfield's body, the metal detector is going off like no matter where he puts it. And then he's like, oh yeah, the bullet's here. So they cut the president open and they're like, nah, the bullet ain't here. He's like, oh, wait, no. Hold on. No, it's here. They cut him open, stick the dirty ass fingers inside, prodding around until they realized, wait, he's laying on a mattress that has metal springs underneath it. And then Graham Bell was like, oh. All right, so I'm going to be going right now. Best of luck with this whole president keeping him alive thing. And eventually he succumbed to pretty much, all the bullshit that his body was put through by the doctors and Graham Bell. So, I mean, like I said, there are so many twists and turns in this story that it's just insane.
He always deserved. His trial was just bananas, with Guiteau hurling obscenities at just about everyone there, including his own defense team, and formatting his testimony as an epic poem which he recited in full. He even dictated an autobiography to the New York Herald, which, get this, he ended with a personal ad for a nice Christian lady under 30 years of age. What a baller. When the guilty verdict was read, he called everybody there low consummate jackasses.
He did.
And on June 30th, 1880,
Oh, wait. Sam skipped over the part of his defense. So his defense was that the doctors and Alexander Graham Bell were responsible for Garfield's death. He said, I just shot him. They're the ones who actually killed him. And he kind of had a point, right? He's like, I just shot them, but they're the ones that killed him. It's medical malpractice, not murder. You should be charging them, which in reality, kind of viable. Like nowadays, like today, I think that actually might work.
1882, Guiteau smiled and waved to his adoring fans as he was walked to the gallows, where he recited a repetitive, deranged poem he wrote that morning, which was performed in a high-pitched falsetto voice, since it was written in the point of view of a child. He asked for a full orchestra to play during the reading, which I don't have to tell you that went nowhere, and promptly thereafter, he was hung. When the gallows dropped, people were probably like, ugh, Jesus, it's finally over. I just came here for...
Yeah, I could picture him like that scene in Goodfellas when Joe Pesci kills Maury, and he stabs him in the neck from behind, and he's like, Jesus Christ, I thought he'd never shut the fuck up. But yeah, I think the poem was called like something like Off to See the Lordy. Like, I mean, this man, but like I said, he was so convinced he was going to get off and be freed. And he was planning an 1884 presidential run. He thought, this is it. This is my moment to shine.
For a nice little execution, they subject me to all that? I want my money back, frankly. So it just goes to show, you can't always get what you want. Unless that thing is getting everyone to hate
but you can
that's
get what you need.
Extraordinarily easy. But for everything else, you're gonna need a combination of hard work and know-how. While the former must ultimately come from within, there's plenty of resources out there for the latter. The best of which is a seldom talked about little startup called Skillshare.
All right, Skillshare, there you go. But yeah, so a couple of additional points to, again, another wonderful video by Sam. is Garfield himself. So, again, like Sam said, you know, a lot of people don't talk about this one because, you know, Garfield, who cares, right? But Garfield was actually, I mean, he wasn't in office for a long period of time. He was only in office for several months. But in that time, he actually accomplished a lot, including because he was a big stalwart and one of the few presidents of that period who was actually for civil rights for the freedmen, right? Because after Lincoln gets assassinated, Andrew Johnson comes in and basically was like, oh, fuck all that shit that Lincoln wanted, right? Let's put the slaves back into their place. And then you get the whole tumultuous Reconstruction era, which really goes nowhere. Whereas Garfield, again, was against secession. He joined the Union Army. He was a general. And he wanted to retire after the Civil War. But President Lincoln urged him to run for office, which he did. And then after that, he wanted to retire, right? He was kind of like Michael Corleone. He's like, as soon as I thought it was out, they pulled me back in. So then a congressional seat opens up. And they're like, yo, Garfield, you should run for that. He's like, no, I'm going to retire. They're like, no, run for this. He didn't want it. All the way up until, you know, everybody's like, Ulysses S. Grant is going to be the first president to get a third term. And the Republicans were like, nah, you know what? We like this Garfield guy. And it goes back to the theory of Pericles, right? Pericles said way back when that true leaders, good leaders, are those who do not seek to lead, right? But are chosen by the people. And that's really what Garfield was. He did not seek that path. He did like nothing. Even when he was running for president, he literally did very little. He would do like small speeches, like off a porch, his porch. He was not trying to win, but he wins narrowly because, again, he didn't do much. Most people didn't even know that he was running, but he wins. And when he does win, he does, well, he's like, I got the job, so, you know, I got to do the job. And he actually does a lot. Especially at the time, there was a lot of corruption in civil service, specifically the post office. And he put in a lot of civil service reforms that are still used to this day. He cleaned up all the corruption that was going on in the post office, for the most part, of course. And he is also one of the presidents that's really responsible for the expansion of the executive branch, right? Because originally the executive, you know, the president and the executive branch were not meant to be the power that they are today. The president was never meant to be, quote unquote, the most powerful man in the world, right? But eventually, as time goes on, presidential powers get redefined. And Garfield was one of those presidents because he challenged Congress. He challenged state officials, especially in New York, right? So these challenges expanded the power of the executive and many other things. And he did it all, again, within a period of several months. James Garfield was also an amazing orator. I mean, he was, even Lincoln, you know, praised him on his speaking abilities. And there was a reason Lincoln wanted him to continue and to run for office instead of just retire, right? I believe if he had lived, I mean, I don't know if the course of history would be dramatically changed, but it would definitely be different. And I think in a very positive way. So it's just so unfortunate because then Garfield is followed by a lot of ineffective presidents, a lot of very racist presidents, you know, until we get Teddy Roosevelt. But then even after Teddy Roosevelt, we get Woodrow Wilson, so on and so forth. So again, another great video by Sam Manella. This is just a crazy story. I don't know why it's not discussed as well. I know why, but it should be, because it is far more interesting than the Oswald story and the Booth story. And yeah, so I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, let me know below. Let me know. I'll most probably have to finish out the quartet and do a video on McKinley as well. But in either case, thank you guys for the support. Check out the links in the description for my Patreon page to support me. Really appreciate it. You know, whatever you can spare. Membership start at just you know, $2. Also my social media links, all that good stuff. I've been Teacher Ready, and I will catch you in the next video, fam. And as always, shining out the Patreons who keep things running here, starting with the Chancellors: Elena G, Nazvanyu, Douglas C, KP, the Hollow King, the Principals, Aaron Shepard, Addison, Clement, Vijandra, Rachel, Alex, King Panda, Freeman, Moody Kakari, Nathan, Chad, Chris, Debago, Sophia, Robin, Lord Gandalf, Luna, Harry, Robin, and Blue Tech. And of course, Rasmus. I've been Teacher Ready, and I'll catch you next time.